So Doug Eckenrod,
Sir.
you are running for sheriff.
Yeah. This race is not personal in any way. I've heard a myriad of exaggerated assaults on the current sheriff. I think he's mismanaged the budget. That's my criticism. I think he's misused the budget and the resources he's gotten.
So Yavapai County Sheriff's Office has staffing issues, poor prioritization of funds, a leader who is feared rather than respected by the people that work for him. We have a conflict of interest with the sheriff's wife being a CEO of the nonprofit organization that is receiving work from the county in some form or another. If any of this stuff is true, then people need to know about it.
Well, yeah, of course they do.
So I just want you to understand that that's why I have to ask you this stuff to your face.
What's up with Spectrum Healthcare?
Yeah.
What does that even mean?
We have reports of lowered crime rates when that's actually misleading due to the way that they're calculated, and crime is actually up. We have new positions being created in the sheriff's office, but not the ones that the community needs. So-called fully staffed department, when it may be fully staffed based on the positions available that have been created to staff, rather than fully staffed based on the needs of the people living in Yavapai County or the needs of the deputies to have sufficient force.
My priority would be to remedy that immediately.
When I spoke with Sheriff Rhodes on this show, he told me we're not losing guys at the rate that we're hiring them. Well, that rate could be either direction. You could be hiring less than you're losing, or you could be hiring more than you're losing.
We don't have people quitting at the rate that we're hiring people. Like I said, the staffing levels are very good. Well, we're doing very well at a lot of things. Recruitment and retention. Our recruitment and our retention is doing better than it's done in a lot of years.
Now, how many guys or women are you hiring versus are losing in a given amount of time?
Well, we're going to do a presentation to the Board of Supervisors on March 20th, and we'll talk about this. But our vacancy rate has dropped dramatically since the summer, and you'll see that. We had about 120 vacancies in July, I believe that it was, and we're down around 50. It might even be closer to 40. So we've caught up a lot.
Does that mean you've hired 70-ish people?
We might have hired more than that, because I'm going to present those numbers on the 20th.
Yeah.
We're working on that because we have had some retirements and normal attrition and whatnot, but we made a huge leap forward.
So one of the things that the sheriff has absolutely been accurate on is that he has hired quite a few positions. Unfortunately, they're not wearing badges and they're not turning keys. And so we've done a great job at filling and expanding the non-sworn ranks at the expense of patrol and detention officers.
This is a rural
job. Yeah.
And so the backup that we have out in these rural areas comes from other areas. So you may be backed up by a DPS officer, you may be backed up by a Coconino County Sheriff's deputy, or you may be backed up by another sheriff's deputy if you need backup at all. A lot of the sheriff's deputies handle a lot of the calls by themselves.
The priority is always a well-staffed, appropriate level of staffing for patrol. Then you start thinking about specific targeting. I mean, I don't know how to say it. It's dangerous. It's too dangerous.
Well, we've seen that. We've seen the results of that.
Staff don't believe that there is a commitment from this leadership team to stop that problem.
Let's talk about the specific positions that have been created in Yavapai County Sheriff's Office.
Yeah.
That basically don't or shouldn't take priority over the lower deputy levels.
Right.
What I have here is that there's 12 rehabilitative counselors there doing Spectrum's work at the sheriff's office.
Right.
And that's being paid for by the county.
Right. These are county employees. When you have a rehabilitative contractor, it says, hey, we want to partner with you, but we want you to build our physical infrastructure for us, the facility that we're going to sit people in, and the power. and the computers and all of the other stuff that's associated with running a rehabilitative treatment center co-located with a jail. But you've got 12 folks that are rehabilitative counselors that are screening and assessing and prioritizing and applying risk levels and risk tools to inmates so they can be prepped and ready to be pushed across the hallway to rehabilitative treatment. The contractor, who's won a large contract, competitive bid contract, should be paying the salaries. Those shouldn't be county employees.
Yeah.
These should be rehabilitative treatment employees.
Right.
But I'd like to see those monies freed up from the salaries of those 12 folks. And those salaries of those 12 folks could likely drive about 9 deputy positions. You start identifying opportunities. Do we really need 3 public information officers?
Yeah.
Do we really need 3 public relations officers?
For Yavapai County.
For Yavapai County. Do we really need a spokesperson for the leader of our psychiatric services? Does that person need a spokesperson? Should they have take-home cars? And so just from this tiny little conversation right here, there's 18 potential positions. So I take office January 1st of 2025. It will send a signal to deputies who are thinking about punching out when they're working on their resumes. Hey, they are serious about fixing this. Stop the bleeding, continue recruiting.
Yeah.
And so these are the financial decision-making processes that we've got to really lean into to fix this thing with a net zero ask of the board. Because on the current trajectory, the board is going to have to come back to the populace and ask for a 0.25% tax increase to fix these problems.
Yeah.
The Eckenrod plan is, no, we wring every position out of our existing budget, because I argue there's plenty.
Who's benefiting and who is not benefiting? If you just make it that black and white from these admin positions, okay, well, it seems like the administrative staff and everything that goes into running the sheriff's department would be benefiting, but you don't see the results of that.
Right.
And it doesn't seem like the public, which is the real client here,
Yes.
is benefiting. We're the
Absolutely.
customer.
Right.
This is our money. The perspective between, I guess, me, the public, or you, the person that knows what's happening and how to fix it. You know, my questions would be the same. Like, how are these tax increases benefiting us? You can tell us that this is happening all day, but then when the numbers don't match it or the numbers aren't available, then what are you doing? You're not serving the people, and that's the point of this whole thing: public service.
That's the whole point of my campaign. They've backed themselves into a financial corner. They can't come back and ask for another property tax increase. It's impossible.
27 more years before they can ask for another property tax increase here?
They had decided they were going to build the Justice Center before they had the finances to do it.
Right. Yeah, this has been in the making for like 20 years,
Right.
apparently.
And so the question that was placed on the ballot to the voter was, there was no question really at all. You're going to pay for this. Mm-hmm. Do you want to pay for it this way, or do you want to pay for it another way? YCSO leadership walked the Board of Supervisors into a corner. And their unlimited back the blue attitude and trust for the existing leadership team walked them into a position that they are screwed.
When I was speaking with Sheriff Rhodes, he was specifying that the bond was for $70 million or so.
But the first projections of how much it was going to cost to build this thing were in the 50 millions.
I learned that the building of that jail cost $70 million.
The bond was $70 million, but I don't believe that's what the facility costs.
Okay, so the increase in property taxes for people in Yavapai County was 18% because of that build or that bond, right?
Well, you're going to have there's more facts to that I don't think are correct.
Okay.
I think maybe the county's portion of property tax was 18%, but the overall property tax was like 2 or 3% increase.
Total expenditure now is up to $85 million if you look at the impact to other entities who couldn't move into the Justice Center because rehabilitative services have occupied that space and they had to build other locations. This is, hey, what are the ramifications of this horrible decision? And now they're looking at $85 million. But it's the biggest single expenditure, I think I'm right when I'm saying this, that Yavapai County has ever done.
Because
imagine
if you're $85 million in debt, and one of the things that Sheriff Rhodes told me was that part of the reason that they built it in such a way so that there's 144 beds, but they can serve up to 600 inmates or people being held there, was it because, well, in prisons that a lot of the time they do that. They build the main structure and then they have the option to build another wing.
Pod, yeah.
Well, if it costs $70 million to build what's there right now, it's going to cost at least another $20-30 million to build another single pod. But we can't raise our property taxes to pay for it. And we're not going to vote for a 0.25% increase in our taxes to pay for it again.
You're not fully informing me of where you're going with these things.
So you better vote for a sheriff who can figure this out with the money we got. They go, hey, if we infinitely encourage irresponsible growth, we can grow property taxes out of the problem.
Well, it's easy to justify your own gain.
The reasons that folks wanted a new jail were inverted. So it's no longer a jail. It's a rehabilitative center that has a custody component to it. And that's a critical thing.
How much is the Board of Supervisors willing to give the sheriff's office whatever is asked for? Do you know?
I have a sense. I've spoken to many of them.
So what is your relationship to the board in as far as managing money or saying, hey, we need this stuff? How does that all work?
Well, on a very high level, the sheriff is responsible for the operations, the jail, law enforcement, and whatnot. And I come to them with a proposed budget, like all the elected officials. And we negotiate over what that budget's going to be and for what reason, why we need it. Once they give me the budget, or any of the elected officials, once they authorize the budget, they approve of it, then we go and spend the budget within the parameters that they've set up. And that gives the sheriff some flexibility and latitude over certain things, like operational costs. Maybe it's equipment, maybe it's certain things, but a lot of that is set. The lion's share of the budget is salaries and benefits. I want to say it's about 83% of the budget. And that's set by the Board of Supervisors through a negotiation with me. But, once it's set, it's set.
And if they trust me, they're likely going to roll with me.
Yeah.
But imagine a different scenario where I want to see significant growth in rehabilitative investment. And you trust me. Back the blue can now be something that actually injures the blue.
I'm trying to get a good, clear picture because I know there's somewhere around 100, a little more than 100 deputies on staff, right?
Well, about 100 certified positions.
Yeah, actual out there on patrol at any given time during the week.
Yeah, about 140.
140?
Yeah.
You can really see an agency's priorities, not by what they're saying, not by the press releases, by the budget.
Are those deputies that are getting those types of increases, a 75%?
Yeah. Deputies, awesome. Yeah. It's not the sheriff, I can tell you that.
No.
Our salary's set by statute, and you don't get any pay increases.
So obviously you're alluding to the fact that the sheriff's wife is the CEO of Spectrum Healthcare, who is a service delivery vehicle for psychiatric and rehabilitative services in Yavapai County. And that's a fact.
My wife is the CEO of a nonprofit organization there.
Does their sub-company have contracts with the county for pretrial diversion?
They're part of a partnership with Polera Health. That company has a contract with the county attorney's office for pretrial diversion. That has nothing to do with me, the office of the sheriff, nothing.
And I've looked at it, as you might imagine, as a candidate about as hard as I can from where I'm sitting. And I'll start with saying I see no illegal activity there, and I don't see any violations of business code or contractual code. The state is vectoring large amounts of grant money to rehabilitative and psychiatric treatment. The county gets to approve the contract bidding process for who gets those contracts. The contract winners right now are companies called Polera and complete care.
The rumors is that I directed contracts to her,
Right.
and I didn't,
Okay.
and that she makes money off of these contracts, and she doesn't.
But in regards to Polera and complete care, they actually aren't delivering the service. They are just like an independent insurance agency, right? They're a broker in a sense. So they contract with Spectrum.
They contract with Spectrum, and which one of these contracts with the county? Is it Spectrum or Polera and Complete Care?
Polera and Complete Care get dough from the county. Some of it's county dollars, some of it's underwritten by grants that the county gets to decide who gets the contract. But Spectrum's delivering the lion's share of rehabilitative treatment and rehabilitative treatment that's associated with pretrial diversion, which I'm very much against. My concern is the sheriff able to give the right advice in regards to rehabilitative investment to the county?
To the board?
Yes. The board's trusting him when they're making their decisions on where to spray dollars. Now, look, if this is the sheriff's view, that this is where we need to be spraying money, tens of millions a year, then that's his opinion, and it's wrong. And because all of my experience, and I've seen the disaster that was California, they walked down this exact road to include the personal relationships on both ends of these. I believe the priority is detention officers, patrol officers, their safety, that's tied to public safety. And it appears that the county is on the track of prioritizing rehabilitative treatment. If you build this huge rehabilitative infrastructure, we're going to attract folks from all over Arizona who have problems, and they don't leave. It's like the Hotel California, but we'll call it the Hotel Prescott. And this, over time, is disastrous.
So what is salary savings?
It's just money that when you had positions that weren't filled, and but they were budgeted, that money didn't get spent; it was saved.
The salary savings, the money that they're not having to spend on these folks' salaries, because now it's being paid by the state, accumulates in a piggy bank.
Yeah, and the board gets to decide what to do with that.
No.
Is what
YCSO gets to decide.
Rhodes himself told me that money goes back into the budget, and I tried to clarify, like into a savings account to roll over to the next year. He said, yeah, back into like a savings account, and then the board gets to decide where that money goes.
Well,
It was budgeted for salaries, and it was saved.
So does it like stay in the savings account, or does it go somewhere else to be applied?
No, it gets swept up by the Board of Supervisors at the end of the year.
Okay. And then where does it go?
They bring it back in
To be used the following year?
the following year.
Okay, so it goes into like a savings account. Then he lied to me about who chooses how to spend salary savings money.
Right. Or you get to clown me for being wrong. In any normal scenario, you'd spend every last dime of that on overtime to cover shifts to reduce risk to officers. Most counties don't operate that way. You'd have to go back to the board and say, hey, I've got this salary savings in this line item. I need to convert this to something else. And there's a conversation and a decision's made.
Because they're choosing not to fill positions that are available.
Because in a sense, we're incentivizing the salary savings. We can't fill these positions. Okay, well, why can't you fill them? And then, hey, well, we have to cover, we've got the vacancies that were driven by task force. Well, someone made a decision to give 20 folks, 20% of patrol nearly, to the state. The monies for task force are voted on. Legislature creates a basket of dough. And then the governor gets to aim where the money goes. These are concepts that are very difficult to deliver in 7 minutes or in 1.5 minutes,
The way that the numbers of lowering crime are being reported to the public versus, maybe the actual numbers or how they're being calculated that is misleading.
Right. I like using publicly available websites where you can filter by every single jurisdiction in Arizona. So every single agency, by crime type, by overall crime, by year. Is Maricopa County, you won't be surprised, just made a decision to no longer participate in this data collection. I encourage people to experiment with the tool. And so even if you adjust for population growth, crime is up. But it does call into question what he's advertised as a 30% reduction in recidivism. I'm trying to make heads or tails of this 30% reduction number. Now, I do not know, because you cannot find it, the mathematical means or formula or definition that YCSO is using. Well, I should say the leadership team for YCSO is using.
Whatever they're saying publicly is that that number has been reduced by 30%
Yes.
in the last how long?
Well, that's just it. You can't get any sort of definition. Did they use 5 years? Did they use 3 months? Did they use a control group of only people who went through a particular program? Did they choose left-handed offenders?
So it's possible that this 30% number is a real number, but we don't know how it's being calculated or based on what crimes or what timeline. Like a confirmation bias. Like, I'm going to look
Yes.
for this point on the graph
Right.
where it drops this much, and that's what I'm going to report.
I think what should happen is I think that the sheriff's office should share the data and the exact calculation on how they came to this 30% number.
Well, we deserve that as people because we're paying for them to exist.
Right.
And if they don't tell us what they're doing with our money, then that's a problem.
Every agency that shifted from crime suppression to excuses for human failure advertised these kind of successes, and they weren't true. And if their contractual engagements resulted in real, durable 30% recidivism, this would be the study of every criminal justice university across the country, because it does not happen on macro levels.
Mm-hmm.
And don't forget about the impact of pretrial diversion. That's why I really clarified the conviction part. You know, how frequently, what's the likelihood of a rearrest post-release? No, it's a conviction 3 years post-release.
Yeah.
And so with pretrial diversion, if you incentivize, and I argue that it's incentivizing drug use because you get a second or third or 10th chance.
Obvious, I'm seeking re-election.
How does the dismissal of charges in exchange for rehabilitative completion impact the calculations for recidivism?
I wish you would have shared all of this information with me before I think that would have been fair for you to do that, and you didn't do that.
I've interviewed both of the other gentlemen running for your position.
Advocating for standing up 500 pre-vetted folks who don't have they don't have a criminal history, can pass the Arizona post-shooting course, and will take an oath of allegiance to the Constitution and, defend it against all enemies, foreign and domestic. Because they're on standby status during only catastrophic emergencies. The more prepared the citizenry is, the less burden it is on the policing or sheriff's department. And the last thing I like to always mention, the bookend to my spiel is, as you know, through many of our conversations and showing toys and things like this, there's no stronger defender of the Second Amendment than me. I will bleed and make others bleed in defense of this Second Amendment. But you've got to go one step further and say, I won't allow unconstitutional gun laws to be enforced in this county. And so immediately upon taking office, I'm going to draft letters to all of the alphabet soup law enforcement agencies saying you cannot conduct firearm-related enforcement in Yavapai County without my permission, written. We take the Constitution serious here. We take the oath of office serious here. And so part of my duty is to protect your civil rights, many of them ensconced in the Bill of Rights.
Yes.
And so I would be negligent in my duty if I didn't defend your rights, speech, firearms, quartering troops. Mm-hmm. Justice underpins liberty. You are as free as you can possibly be until you step on somebody else's liberty. That should be the objective of every public servant who raises their right hand.
What are your leadership skills and qualifications for doing this?
Major arrests, significant things that took place in the field. As a correctional officer, correctional sergeant, parole agent, armed in a plainclothes role, gang agent signed to task force for Fairfield Police Department, now back in uniform, became a state of California fugitive agent, hybrid role, undercover about 80% of the time, doing warrant service in the Bay Area, moving from an undercover role to suited and booted SWAT role, forcing entry, either with a warrant or because the house was searchable due to parole and probation, and went back and supervised all those teams. So from 2006 to 2014, I'm only in the field, either in a uniformed or undercover role, being paid by the state of California as a peace officer, riding infrastructure of local entities. I've booked in more counties than exist in Arizona.
So we can put to rest the question of, are you qualified to be the sheriff of Yavapai County?
Well, I wouldn't be if it stopped there. If my experience stopped there.
Okay.
Right? I did an episode of the equivalent of Cops where I'm arresting people on television and
nice.
the fugitive teams. I mean, I have so many videos of myself in different ways, surveilling, hooking, interrogating folks. I mean, and much of it was captured because there were public interest cases. I don't know any peace officer that I know, period, whose career is as documented as mine. Much of the job transitions from hooking and booking to leadership and budgets and dealing with legislature and dealing with community issues.
Yeah.
And when I became academy commander, there's recruitment and retention issues when I became a chief deputy.
So you have the qualifications, you have the technical skill, you have the leadership ability, you have the ability to articulate, you see where the problems are, you're developing solutions to fix them.
So you better vote for a sheriff who can figure this out with the money we got. I'm going to work very, very hard to fix this budget, improve patrol operations, and be as transparent a leader as I can possibly be. July 30th, vote for me, please.